Hi everyone, I'm Sophie. I work for Star Academies, a multi-academy trust with schools across the country. I'm not a teacher, but I am privileged to work with teachers and school leaders as part of my job. I am a mum, and with one child back at school and the other at home trying to stay motivated with his home learning, it's great to have support with the challenges the changing situation brings. To accompany our home learning line, StarLive, we are hosting a weekly broadcast with a range of guests to cover different ideas to help you keep your kids learning and happy. With longer days and bright evenings, sleep can often be affected in the summer, but during the pandemic, worries and fears might be making this worse and could be causing children to have weird and possibly frightening dreams. Expert sleep physiologist Stephanie Romachevsky is here to explain why the current situation might be impacting on sleep and what parents and carers can do to help children sleep better. She's here from the Sleepyhead Clinic, and you can find out more at her website, sleepyheadclinic.co.uk. Thanks so much for joining us, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess my first question is, what are the most common sleep issues you hear about, and how are these different or made worse by the current situation?
Probably the most common thing we hear about is children and adults not able to get to sleep. So actually having a problem when you get to the bedroom, whether you were sleepy or not, just not being able to then be able to go into a nice sleep within, 10 or 15 minutes. Then you would probably have issues maintaining that. So you might not have a problem going to sleep, but then you wake up in the middle of the night and it's really hard to get back to sleep. And that's horrible, because at that point it's usually very, very dark and you're in a room and everybody else is asleep, and it makes you feel like you're the only one up in the whole world, which makes you feel very lonely. And then the final problem that we sometimes get is just feeling like the quality of sleep has been really poor and not really feeling very refreshed in the morning. The way that has been changed or exacerbated is that we're definitely still seeing people not able to get to sleep and maintain the sleep. But the added interesting thing that's happened is an increase in the frequency of dreaming and the sort of graphic nature of those dreams. So sometimes, I don't know if you sort of remember your dreams, but you might not. And then maybe other times it's super, super graphic. You can remember everything. But at the moment, people are really able to remember their dreams quite well, and also just know that they've had quite a lot, and that might be making them feel quite knackered during the day. And in children, it can be quite scary if the nature of those dreams isn't particularly nice.
Sure, and I imagine then that knocks on children not wanting to go to sleep if they've been scared of the dream.
Oh yes, very vicious cycle. And we understand why. I mean, the routines have changed. So lockdown happened very quickly and suddenly all of our routines changed. So that's one big thing. So when we talk about routine, we're talking about behavior. So you might not be getting up at the same time as you used to. You might be going to bed at different times. You might be napping during the day, or finding that, just things have shifted. But not only that, you're not getting the exercise, you're not getting the social sort of side of being a human, which we all definitely need. And it is not the same doing everything online, unfortunately. We might be accessing more people with the new technologies that we've had in the last few years, but we're not having the same kind of connections as we once were, and that is definitely affecting our mental health, and it affects our sleep as well, because if you're not able to do the things that make you human and healthy during the day, then that's a lot for your sleep to take on at night. And your sleep is it's not a restful state. It is an active state of your body trying to recover. It is trying to process. It's trying to consolidate. And the more that's going on during the day, or the lack of things going on during the day, just effectively change and stress definitely will have an impact on your sleep. And we're seeing all these dreams, these weird and wonderful dreams.
That's really interesting. And so what can parents do to help children sleep better?
So one thing that we know about, for example, the dreaming situation, is that most of these dreams are happening in a stage of sleep called REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is what we associate with most of our dreaming, but we do dream in other areas. It's not just REM. We tend to have REM in the second half of the night and more towards waking up. So you'll have more REM towards the time when you're waking up in the morning. So one good theory is that actually if children are allowed to lie in more, then they're going to have more REM sleep, and therefore they're probably more likely to wake up in the middle of REM and remember their dreams, because that's when we have those graphic memories when we've been woken out of REM sleep. So one thing you could do is stick to a very rigid waking up time, much the same as when they were going to school, or having a bit more of a routine. So consistency in the wake time is incredibly important. However, also sort of touching on the whole fearing sleep and things, it's actually not that helpful, and it never really has been, at putting children to bed at a specific time. So you can't dictate sleep, unfortunately. I wish we could, but we can't. So the mere act of sending a child to a dark room is actually quite scary sometimes, and can actually lead to lifelong issues with sort of never being able to really get to sleep to start with. Which I see quite frequently, actually. So what would be better is actually, it's obviously important to have a good wind down routine, and to reduce lighting and make everything more calm, and doing more calming activities towards bedtime, and having that same opportunity each day to sleep is really important. So we know that if you need the sleep, that opportunity is there. You've got a lovely comfy bed, a nice darkened room. But to be able to actually just continue to doing an activity until they're sleepy, rather than sort of forcing everything shuts down, you've got to go to bed now, is much more healthy. And what you'll notice is if that is the way that it's being dealt with, and actually that's the way the whole household is dealing with sleep, and you've got a very rigid wake up time that doesn't usually change, not even at the weekends, you'll start to notice that sleep will become fairly regulated on its own, and you'll probably start to notice that they go to bed at the same time every night without you having to dictate it as much. Of course, we do with children need to dictate it to a degree, but it's just that harsh force, right? It's so and so o'clock. That's it. You've got to go to bed. That's it. There's nothing else, and that can be a little bit scary. So just having those nice, chilled, gentle activities that you're happy for them to do would be much more helpful. And then the last thing I would say is to actually not allow too much recuperating during the day. So depending on the child's age, depends on what kind of nap situation they need, but certainly it shouldn't be all over the place. So if the nap is in place, it needs to be a consistent nap at exactly the same time every day for a short period of time. So let's say around 30 minutes, for example. But what we shouldn't really be doing is just encouraging napping at all sorts of times of the day, but also napping to compensate. So if the sleep hasn't been got properly at night, if you start using napping to compensate where the child isn't napping usually, for example, an older child or a teenager, then you're actually going to start perpetuating the sleep problem at night. So that's for the general sort of behavioral issues with sleep, and trying to get it sort of a better quality and more regulated. Those are the things that would be better to focus on.
That's really interesting. I don't know if my eyebrows raised when you said about not fixing bedtime, because I definitely fix bedtime for both of my kids. But one is really different to the other. One will say to me, "It's now my bedtime," and take herself off to bed. Yeah. And the other one is constantly pushing for, "No, I'm not ready yet. I'm not sleepy yet. I want to read the next chapter and the next one."
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. And so we've talked a little bit about this, but if children are resisting sleep, how can we encourage that kind of openness and readiness for sleep?
So I think often when children are resisting sleep, there's often like unresolved things going on anyway. So the first thing during what we've got at the moment, so the corona lockdown or easing of the lockdown, or whatever, what we're doing right now, is to make sure that, they've had an opportunity, and I like to call it a time to worry. So like they're allowed to talk, they're allowed to worry about things, but that you might have that opportunity a little bit earlier in the evening, or indeed sort of late day, but not too much in the evening actually, where they can discuss with you what's going on, and it's actively encouraged. Because I think the sad thing I think we learn from a young age is that certain emotions are bad, and they're not. There's no emotions that are bad. And they're usually just a sign that your brain is in need of some sort of change, that's all. So they're there for a really healthy reason. And so discussing them is really helpful. Instead of pushing them down and just encouraging relaxing activities, even in adults, they need a chance to vent or to write things down or to just, have an opportunity to feel a bit more content with the world around them. And then getting ready for bed, and actually getting ready for bed a little bit earlier is quite helpful, because then all they've got to do before they go to bed is literally go to sleep. So after their activity, they just get to go off to sleep, instead of, let's get you up, brush your teeth and do all those things that actually wake the brain up. And this is in adults as well. We're not so different, us children, as adults. And so, the way you do things before you go to bed can be incredibly helpful. And just really trying to figure out for that particular child, what does wind them up and what does wind them down, because we're so dictated to about what those things are. But actually, it's like yoga, for example, in adults. Some yoga winds us up. Other yoga seems to relax us. Some people just can't get on with it. So we're all different. So finding those things that might be sort of helpful, and almost seeing that time after you've got ready for bed as a treat time, like a really nice time where they get to do their favorite little activity that just, something that really they love. And that can be very helpful. And then, of course, having that sort of in-between time where they don't have to go to sleep, but they're allowed the light on low, and they're allowed to do something like read or something nice and gentle and relaxing, can be incredibly helpful. But usually one of the things you can do, if the situation has got really hard and they're really struggling, then your best bet is not to look at this reactively, like, what can I do tonight to fix that, my child right now. What you would better be doing is just going over time, like thinking, okay, over the next 2 weeks, what I'm going to do is we're going to have a consistent wake up time. And then I'm actually going to push their sleep time a little bit later. So this is the interesting thing. In order to fix sleep, you need to build a nice, strong sleep drive. This can be quite scary for the parents in the first instance, because it sounds like I'm asking you to do the opposite, but only in the short term. So just pushing that sleep time a little bit later, maybe half an hour later or something like that than they usually do, actually get them really sleepy, and do that for like 7 days. And then what you'll notice is the sleep that they do get is much better quality than it usually is, especially if you're waking them up at the same time every day, which might be hard to start with, but I promise you they'll start getting refreshed, especially if you get some bright light in the mornings. Fantastic. That will really help them feel alert. And then what you notice is it starts to boost the quality, and then you can start slowly bringing it back out. So just 15 minutes per week of bringing it back to the sleep time that you want them to go to bed. And you'll notice that you can do all the things that you want that child to do. It's just, it takes a bit more time, because the brain is like a small puppy. It's constantly learning, especially when they're children. And so you've got to do things fairly slowly and fairly consistently in order for the brain to trust what you want it to do.
That is all so interesting. That was so full of ideas. I'm just going to try and summarize what I think I've heard you say. So I think a really key one, and one that shocked me, is not to insist on a bedtime, and instead to put in place really strong pre-bed routine that winds them down, and to respond to what your child wants in that wind down. Where we should be strict is waking them up in the morning, and we should try and get a really regular time to do that. I really like the idea of giving them a time to worry and moving that to earlier in the day so that it doesn't impact on bedtime. What have I missed? What else did you say? That was so jam-packed with ideas.
Sorry.
It was great. No, it was really great.
Probably just restriction. So actually this idea that restriction might be helpful sometimes.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's really nice to have some solutions if sleep has become a real barrier, and that idea of pushing sleep later will be really helpful. That was fantastic, Stephanie. Thank you for all of those ideas. I feel like we could talk all day about this, but that's great. And thank you for sharing those tips. I'm sure parents and carers
You're welcome.
Really helpful. We're really pleased to have been part of the response to the pandemic and have felt privileged to support so many parents and carers at this challenging time. StarLine is here to help. For more personalised advice and guidance, we would encourage you to call StarLine on the number at the bottom of the screen, 0330 313 9162. You can also go to our website, starline.org.uk, and you can contact us via Facebook. Just search StarLine Helpline. I mentioned it at the beginning, but you can also find out more about Stephanie's support on her website, which is this sleepyheadclinic.co.uk. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
Great.
thank you.
And in the meantime, we look forward to seeing you next week. Stay safe.